Hey Storehouse family, welcome to our Sunday Sermons collection. This is where we will be posting our Sunday messages to capture the heart and story of our community as we grow together in every season. The Storehouse is a family that believes walking with Jesus is the greatest privilege of all. We believe that God is our abundant source and supply. Our heart is to gather together to worship and love Him, empowering us to serve and love our community. We believe God's house is meant to be a place of abundance, a storehouse of truth, grace, healing, and generosity for all to be a part of.
Well, morning, everybody. Are we all well? Well, that makes 50% of us lying already, doesn't it? That is a good start. And I've got the privilege today of talking about part 3 of the Jesus said, I am. He was very clear in saying I am on numerous occasions. And today we're going to look at the statement Jesus made when he said, I am the resurrection and the life. And I think I'm going to do a bit of a subtitle to that as well, really. And that's if and when misses the peace available in the present. And I'm going to talk a little bit this morning about if and when, and that misses the peace that's available in the present. So I'm going to ask you some questions this morning. I'm not going to ask you to answer them out loud. I'm going to ask you to answer them in your minds. But I'm going to make sure that you're awake. I went to a service a long time ago now in a middle of summer, really hot day. Not quite as hot as we've got now, but it was similar to a few days ago. And the speaker was all talking about Christians waking up and the need to wake up. And the fact that we at times are sleepwalking through life. And as I was speaking, I could see this really big guy. He's bigger than me. And I know the guy a little bit. He's Scottish. And he was nodding off. And he was on the end of the row. And I could see his head was going. And then he almost fell into the aisle where everybody could see him. But he did manage to just save himself. And he woke up. And then the person behind him tapped him on the shoulder and gave him a boiled sweet. I'm not sure what that does. Perhaps he'd choke as well as fall off the chair. But he gave him a boiled sweet. So I'm going to keep an eye out this morning. I've not brought any boiled sweets, but hopefully I won't need them. So how many of us are sleepwalking through life? How does it feel to do that? And I've done that for many years in the past. So we're going to look at the claim that Jesus made, that he's the resurrection and the life. And it's found in John, and it's found in the historical account of Lazarus. And I say historical account because sometimes we say Bible stories, and that makes us all feel that these are all just stories. No, they're historical facts that are recorded in the book for us to take some comfort from. So he said in his first section, I'm just going to read the first bit out. In John 11, verse 25, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? And that's almost my first question this morning. Do we believe it? Do we just let it wash over us? Do we think about it? Do we actually dwell on some of these things? Or do we just, out of rotation, the fact that we've been to church, some of us, for many, many years, do we actually really think about it? And do we actually believe it? And if we believe it, do we live our lives as if that is the case? My father was on his last legs a few weeks ago. He's 97. And I'd just arrived at the hospital, just at the point where the doctor was telling me that there's nothing more that could be done really, and they needed to stop his medication. And my dad was hallucinating a little bit, and I was talking to him, and he said, I can see a red carpet. And I'm like, are you on the red carpet? And no, I'm not on the red carpet. I can see yellow. And then he drifted in and out a little bit. And I believe that the red carpet was waiting for him, but he didn't walk on it. And I believe that the red carpet's waiting for us as well at the end of our time, if our faith is in Jesus. Do you believe it? So I'm asking you this morning a little bit, down through history, people have said that they believe it, and they've actually laid their lives down on the back of that belief. Not just a passing glance, not just a story, but an actual laying down of people's lives. And I want you to use your imagination a little bit this morning. This is a story I heard a while ago, and I don't think it's a true story, but it was terrorists burst into a church in the middle of the service. Just imagine that for a moment. We're here, and people burst in with AK-47s, and they effectively require us all to close our eyes, put our heads between our knees, and to sit there one by one. And the ringleader of the gang with their AK-47s pressed up against people's backs effectively says, "Renounce your faith and we'll let you go. But for others who refuse, we're going to execute them." Now, one by one, people started to renounce their faith and walk out. They were mumbling to themselves their excuses. But one by one, they started to leave. One on the front row, where all the holy people sit, stayed behind, but the rest wandered out. Yeah. The back row all stayed. I'm making this bit up. But in essence, they were required to renounce their faith. And there was probably 10 that were not prepared out of the 60 to renounce their faith no matter what. The terrorists didn't execute them at that point. They marched them all to the front and sat them down, put the chairs around in a circle, put all the guns down in the middle, and said, "Well, that's really great because we wanted to chat about who Jesus is, but we only wanted to talk to the Christians." And you think about that for a minute and you put yourself in that position. Would I be the one that was heading out the door, renouncing it and going, "Well, don't worry, I can, God forgives me for these things"? Or would I be real and prepared to lay down my life? And effectively, that's where we find ourselves in this day and age. In fact, in a parliamentary debate earlier this year, looked at particularly martyrdom in Christianity still, and estimated that 4,999 people were martyred last year for their faith across the world. And 70% of those were in Nigeria. So who is this Jesus who people have always been prepared to die for? Who is he? We've heard claims over the last few weeks that Jesus made of, "I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd." But who was Jesus? In our mind, we and if you ask people in the street, gentle Jesus, meek and mild, arriving all very nice. Or was he a radical Jesus who turned the world upside down? Who is he for you? Who is he for the people who are around us? Even some agnostics and some atheists acknowledge that Jesus lived and he died. There's a guy called Barty Herdman who describes himself as an agnostic, but he's quoted as saying, "Jesus existed, and those vocal persons who deny it do so not because they've considered the evidence with the dispassionate eye of the historian, but because they have some other agenda that this denial serves." And I'll read that once again, just so it sinks in. Jesus existed. And those vocal persons who deny it do so not because they've considered the evidence with the dispassionate eye of the historian, but because they have some other agenda that this denial serves. Nicky Gumbel, the pioneer of the Alpha course, breaks the evidence down for Jesus into 3 pillars. There's historical evidence, and I've just made reference to that. Now there's some Roman historians, Tacitus, Suetonius, and Jewish historian Josephus, all documented the historical reality of Jesus and his crucifixion. Well, what do you think? Do you think he was just a nice guy who wandered around and told nice stories? Do you think he was who he claimed to be? And he claimed, unlike any other leader of other movements, he didn't point people towards God. He actually claimed to be God. He claimed the power to forgive sins, and he has that power. He claimed to be the source of life and truth, and he is. He directly stated that I and the Father are one. So Gumbel uses a bit of C.S. Lewis's trilemma. So he basically says he's either a liar, a lunatic, or he's the Lord. And if he's a liar, that means Jesus knew he wasn't God, but he wandered around claiming to be, and he was a deliberate deceiver. You could put him into that category. Do you put him into the category of lunatic? He believed he was God, but he wasn't, and he was deluded, and he was insane. Was that the case? or was he Lord? If his claims were true, he is who he said he was. And Gumbel argues that Jesus' profound moral teachings and character effectively make the first two, liar and lunatic, pretty unlikely when you look at all of his teaching combined together. And that leaves you with another element of the resurrection. Gumbel says the strongest piece of evidence is the resurrection. He argues that the transformation of the disciples, the sudden growth of the early church, and the empty tomb are best explained by Jesus literally rising from the dead. What do you say? Do you know that 9 of the, it's believed in historical Christianity, that 9 of the 12 were martyred for their faith? They're first-hand witnesses. You know, I'm quite happy to follow various people in terms of, and that happens in life. But would you die for the person who you've been following in that sense if it was not true? And I know that the majority of us believe that this is true this morning. But I wanted to now just turn to the death of Lazarus, the bit where Jesus makes this claim. And I'm going to read quite a bit of it, I'm afraid. Now, a man named Lazarus, this is chapter 11 of John. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This is the Mary whose brother Lazarus lay now sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Lord, the one you love is sick. Note that. It's not the one who loves you. It's not the one who supports you. It's not the one who mates with you and friends with you, but it's the one that you love. Lord, the one you love is sick. And that's the message in a nutshell, that Jesus loves us despite of ourselves, despite of our crises, despite of our ups and our downs. The whole message is about love, and Jesus loved him. I don't know this morning, but Jesus is still the same as he was yesterday, today, and forever. He then went on to say, and the chapter 4, verse 4 then reads, when he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you're going back? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. After he said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but the disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us go also, that we may die with him. And that's an interesting point as well, isn't it? Because Thomas was the one who said, unless I see the hand and the nail prints in his hand, unless I see the mark in his side, I won't believe in the resurrection. I don't believe in the resurrection, but here he was willing to go and to die for Jesus at that point in time. Yeah, he didn't believe until he saw it. And again, that's still a modern view, isn't it? I won't believe it till I see it. But it's blessed are the people, Jesus said, who believe without seeing. There'll be greater blessings, Jesus says. So moving on to verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he'll rise again at the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is come into the world. After she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and he's asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who'd come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. And that's a swear word in modern world, isn't it? Jesus wept. But he wept because he had compassion. And he's got compassion for us, each and every one of us now. Then the Jews said, see how he loved them. See how he loved him. But some of them said, could he not, he who opened the eyes of the blind man, kept this man from dying? And the skeptics, isn't there, in life? They'd seen him do some of those things, but yet they still wanted to say, why has he died? So they took away the stone. Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. But when he'd said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grey clothes and let him go. And in that section before, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. Do we ever say if? I can remember in the good old days up north, I was studying for some exams and I wanted a quiet place to go. So I went to the chapel. My dad had the key. I went to the chapel and there was a compound where I could have parked my car, but I was just too lazy to open the gate, put it in the compound and lock it. I do a few hours studying, I come out and the car's gone. And I'm thinking, if only I'd put it in the compound. If only I'd left it on the front of the road where it might have been more visible. If only. It made no difference, did it? And many of us are living our lives on a daily basis in the if only. If only she hadn't left me. If only I had saved harder for a house. If only I hadn't smoked. If only I'd not driven that way. If only I hadn't gone to that Coldplay concert. If only I didn't have the 8th beer. If only somebody loved me. If only I was more attractive. If only Jolene hadn't turned up. While we hopefully learn from the past, we shouldn't live in it. If you drive the car looking in the rearview mirror, you're going to crash. The rearview mirror is something to glance into, but it's not something that we need to stare into. But how many of us are stuck in the present because we're living in the past? And we constantly looking back with that bit of if. Jesus doesn't want us to live in the past. He came to give us new life and to give us life to the full. If we're walking around living in the past, it's a little bit like having a rucksack full of stones. Every if only is like a stone. And for some of them, we put them in our rucksacks, we hang on to them, and they're almost an element of a comfort blanket for us. And I'm not decrying or demeaning the if onlys that we carry around, because for some of them, things in life have not gone the way we expected. And if onlys are genuine for some. But if we carry it around and we spend our life looking backwards in the rearview mirror, we're not going forwards in the present. So what's in your rucksack? Jesus effectively wants us to give him the rucksack and let him empty it. He's never promised us an easy life, but he promised to make our burden light. And he walks alongside us and he loves us no matter what our past has been like. You wouldn't want to if my past was on the TV here for you all to watch, I'd be too ashamed to be in the room. I wouldn't even be in the town because my life has never been as perfect as perhaps people think. You stand up here and people think, oh, you've got something to say. I've only got to say what I've been given to say. And it's a message for me as much as it is for everybody else, because I've got my own what ifs, if onlys. But they're not something that we need to hang on to. If we hang on to regrets, failures, disappointments, the stones sometimes do become a bit of a comfort blanket, and we like that. I could never trust another guy. I could never trust another woman. I couldn't ever start another business. I'm a failure. I'm never going to be a success. What do we speak over ourselves on a daily basis? What are we saying? Is that what Jesus is saying to us? He doesn't say that at all. And if we're to experience peace in the present, we need to let go of our past, and we need to trust our futures to the one who holds the future. Do we believe it? The other point I want to pick out was in verse 24, when Martha said, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again at the resurrection at the last day. She was hanging on to the future. I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. But Jesus effectively told her that he's the resurrection now. He's the resurrection and the life, and whoever believes will never die. She said, yes, I believe that. But how many of us, again, are living in the future, waiting for the future, and missing the present? I retired last year, and for the last 10 years, I said I'd do my garden when I retired. And I never did a jot really, and I did very little in my garden. It was an overgrown mess, so much so that I found 2 ponds that I didn't know I had. It was back to nature and all the rest of it. But the reality was, I found 2 small ponds by clearing a rockery that I never knew I had 2 interconnected ponds, but I found it now. But I missed out for 10 years because Jill's a gardener. And Jill's encouraged me. I'm the donkey and she's the brains. But in clearing the garden, there is a joy in seeing that transform. There is a joy in seeing the difference. But I've been living my life in waiting for the future, waiting for my retirement. I had no intention of doing it really, but Jill's encouraged me to do it. And waiting for that future day meant I missed out on the joy of that garden for the last 10 years. And many of us are waiting. And I can remember when I started work back in 1984, I was on £3,600 a year, and I thought, when I get to £5,000, £100 a week, I will have made it. I was waiting for the future. The 5,000 came and went. I hadn't made it. And we live our lives at times where we sat around and we're waiting for something to happen in the future. But Jesus doesn't promise us tomorrow. He doesn't promise that to us. I can remember I was saved at 18, but I've had ups and downs with Jesus ever since, really. He hasn't been up and down with me, but I've been consistently up and down over the years. But his love has been consistent for me despite all of that. And I can remember about 15 years old telling the youth pastor that I'm going to wait until I'm an old man in the old folks' home and I'm about to croak it, and then I'll repent, because otherwise it's just going to ruin my fun. And say, really, I wanted to ride my moped fast. Well, it did about 29 with me on it. But I wanted to be a bit of a rebel. I wanted to have fun. But all those things are not fun, ultimately, are they? You can grab them, they're fleeting, and you can chase after them. And we were with some neighbours the other day, and they're telling us all about what they've got. And none of those things are things that they can take with them. What you've got is completely and utterly irrelevant, isn't it? I mean, I know it's nice to have a nice car, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those things, but it's not what life is about. And on the last day when they sat there, I was thinking, I'll do that in the future. I'm a risk taker. I like riding fast. I'll take my chances. But how foolish was that? I was waiting for a future day, and I didn't wait forever, because I recognised that was folly. But opportunities only exist in the present if they're taken. If we don't take the opportunities, we're going to wait before we tell other people about Jesus. We're going to wait before we bow the knee completely. We're going to wait before we surrender. If we wait, we miss the peace of the present. And if we don't trust the Father into the future and with our future, then again, we stagnate in the present. I heard a story about a guy in America in 1850, a guy called Nathaniel Hawthorne. He was a very successful man. He had a great job in government. And then one day he lost his job. He had to come home to tell the news to his wife, Sophia. And he was nervous, as you would be, isn't he? You've lost your job. How are you going to cope? What's going to happen? What's the future like? And he didn't know quite how to broach it. But he told her. And she was absolutely delighted. She was absolutely over the moon. She said, this is the day that I've been waiting for. She'd been painting lampshades as a bit of a side hustle for quite a while. She became a very successful American artist, probably one of the first women to do so, really. That era wasn't really a time when women could succeed, but she did just that. And she'd made quite a bit of money that she'd been saving and putting to one side. So she told her husband that he needed to write that novel that he'd always dreamed of and always talked about, and he needed to sit back and have a year off because she'd created that buffer through that saving. He could have said, no, I'm not doing that, get lost, I'm down the job centre, I'm going to have a look for another government job, I might relocate. He could have said no to that. But he seized the opportunity in the moment, and he took a year out and he wrote the Scarlet Letters that went on to make him far more money than he ever did before, because he started to live in the present and not wait for the future. In 1862, he praised his wife. He said, she is the most sensible woman I ever knew in my life, much superior to me in general talent and of fine cultivation. And this morning, there's another quotation I want to give. It's from Peter Marsh, and it's from the 1st of June, 2026. And he said, Jill is the most sensible woman I ever knew in my life, much superior to me in general talent and of fine cultivation, not just in a garden, but in life and life to all its fullness. And Jesus effectively says that to us. Start living in the present, trust him with the future, and let go of the past, because otherwise we're just going to go round and round in circles. We're told to take up our cross and follow him every day. His mercies are new every morning. And yes, we cock it up from time to time, don't we? We say the wrong thing. We were sat with some of the neighbours. Did I take the opportunity to correct some of them on some of the things they were thinking? No, I didn't. And at times, you know, we also called and we heard about Jesus saying he's the light of the world. And sometimes I've got my light so far under the table that there's not even a flicker of light coming out from it. And yet we're encouraged to shine our lights brightly. I went on a motorbike trip. I've been a few times, and there's 3 blokes and myself. We went to Stratford-upon-Avon, and I persuaded 2 out of the 3 to come to church with me on the Sunday morning. And the third one had promised me before now that if I went on this motorbike trip, he'd come to church with me, and he'd reneged every year. But off we went, and he before we left, he did a number, my mate, on one of my friends to try and persuade him not to go to church with me that Sunday morning. And he offered him, you know, let's go for a ride, I've got really nice route, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. And then he sort of spoilt it because he said, and we'll visit my father's grave at the end, which wasn't a very attractive offer, because I was inviting him to hear about life in a church that was alive, or he could have gone with my other mate to visit his father's grave. And there's no disrespect to that. That was fine for him, but it wasn't exactly great for my mate. So my 2 mates came with me, and they felt a peace about the place. They felt the people were great. They felt there was something there, but not at this point in time have either of them made a commitment. But I've not given up, and neither's Jesus. And so, again, Jesus said at one point in that text that I've read, let me go back to it for a moment, I'll summarise, that he called out with a loud voice to Lazarus. He didn't whisper to Lazarus, if you don't mind, like, could you just pop out? He didn't really whisper it, he didn't squeak about it. Sometimes with the gospel, I'm squeaking like a mouse, or I'm not saying anything, or I'm whispering, or I'm trying not to cause offence. But he shouted with a loud voice, did Jesus, Lazarus, come out. And this morning he calls with a loud voice to each and every one of us to come out of our graves and to live in the present, to step out with him. to trust the future to him. And, you know, I forget that at times as well, innit? I've got a house for sale up north. I've had 2 offers this week. I just rejected them straight off. Jill said to me, did you ask God about that? I thought, not really. I just made my own decision. And yet we called to take up our cross. We called to thank him every day and praise and worship him. But it's not a private thing, is it? We are called as well to talk to him and to, in every aspect of our lives, to give him that control. If we're going to trust the future, we're not going to make necessarily all our own decisions. I'm not saying that God makes everything. I'm not waiting for a postcard to come, but I didn't even ask that question. I just made my own decision. And often when we make our own decisions without having any form of thought of God, we make the wrong decisions. When my brother was small, but not my brother's son was small, and we were walking near a harbour and the sun was too close to the edge. My brother didn't use a weak voice. He used a strong and a loud voice because there was a danger that needed to be stopped. He called his son back to his arms. He explained to his son. He loved his son. But he shouted in a loud voice and a firm voice because the alternative was quite significant. And again, if we believe this resurrection, that Jesus is the resurrection, he is the truth, he is the life, he is the way forward, what are we doing about telling other people about that? At times in a loud but gentle voice. It doesn't have to be an aggressive voice, does it? It doesn't have to be an aggressive challenge, but we are called to talk to people gently, but to be loud about our faith as well when it's called to be sensitive to the people around us. But actually we're dealing with life and death. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe it? He's the King of Kings and he's the Lord of Lords. He gave up his life that we may be saved. He simply asks us to believe. He's not asking for a great deal, is he? Because there's nothing that we can bring. In Romans 10:9, it says, if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And verse 13 says, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. He's calling people this morning, first and foremost, to salvation, but each of us too, to a fresh awakening and a fresh day with him. Jordan mentioned it already, and it always makes me smile how the Spirit can interweave what we're saying, because I'm ending with, in all your ways acknowledge him and he'll direct your paths. A modern translation says, trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try and figure out everything out on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do. Everywhere you go, he is the one who will keep you on track. But we do have to do something. We do have to almost do that step forward. And I can remember an old hymn from when I was a kid, really, and it was written a bit before I was a kid. But it's Jesus, I come. And the words of it I want to finish with. Jesus, I come, into thy freedom, gladness and light. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of my sickness into thy health, out of my want and into thy wealth, out of my sin and into myself, thyself, Jesus, I come to thee. Out of my shameful failure and loss, Jesus, I come. Jesus, I come. Into the glorious gain of the cross, Jesus, I come to thee. Out of earth's sorrows and into thy balm, out of life's storms and into thy calm, out of distress to jubilant psalm, Jesus, I come to thee. Out of unrest and arrogant pride, I've suffered from that a little bit, an arrogant pride, Jesus, I come, Jesus, I come. Into thy blessed will to abide, Jesus, I come to thee. Out of myself to dwell in thy love, out of despair into raptures above. Upward and I on wings like a dove, Jesus, I come to thee. Out of the fear and dread of the tomb, Jesus, I come, Jesus, I come. Into the joy and light of thy home, Jesus, I come to thee. Out of the depths of ruin untold, into the peace of thy sheltering fold, ever thy glorious face to behold. Jesus, I come to thee. And he invites us today to come back to him if we've wandered off that track, to come back to him on a daily basis and in all our ways to acknowledge him. But if you've never acknowledged him, he calls you to come today. And that means a step forward. It means a step of faith. Do you believe it? I think 38, I'm not sure what you're going to sing now, but 38 was I believe. And the words of song 38, do you believe them? Our Father everlasting, all creating one, God Almighty, through your Holy Spirit. The words of the creed are effectively what we believe. Do you believe it today? And if you do, are you going to put it into daily action? Are you going to actually tell people? Are we actually going to be brave? Or are we going to be timid as mice and hide our light? God's with us. He'll help us. I pray that we each have the strength to do that this morning. If you don't know who Jesus is, let's have a chat afterwards. Thank you.